Welcome to Every Step Podcast. I'm Christina Weston.
And I'm Judith Beck.
Every Step is the podcast where career and life meet.
Nina, I am so excited about this new series, Headspace Havoc.
I know, what a cool name. Aren't we clever coming up with such a cool name?
I love it. It just says it to a T, because just to let the audience know, obviously we've been talking a lot about career over the last 2 seasons. And to be frank, Christina and I wanted to talk about something else.
Yeah, 50-something episodes. It's, I don't know, 55, 56. I think we've kind of done career.
I think we have. And there's a lot of great podcasts out there that are doing career things and lots of information. And we'll still talk about it. But we really wanted to talk about the stuff that's happening now and the things that keep us up at night. And that's why it's Headspace Havoc, because you know what? It really does you in. You have so many different things going through your head, and they're irrelevant, but it is causing havoc and taking up space. And you know what? It's nice to be able to get it out and talk about it with other people. And as you know, we want to talk to people who don't necessarily agree with us all the time, and like they have the same problem and they want to talk about it, and we just hash it out. We're just everyday people living our lives. We pretty much, everybody wants the same thing, to be happy and healthy and have great relationships. And we want to be able to figure out what we're going to do with this headspace.
Yeah, and how we navigate it. I think, sharing a problem, what do they say? A problem shared is a problem halved. And I think sometimes actually just talking about what's messing with your head lightens the load a little bit, and it makes us feel like we're not alone. I think often many of us go, wow, I've got all these issues, I've got all these problems, I'm the only one in the world with this issue. And then you actually talk about it. Sometimes you're scared to talk about it because there's either shame attached to it or embarrassment. But when you get the courage to talk about what's messing with your head, all of a sudden you find people going, I've had that same experience, or I'm dealing with that same problem, or gee, that's been worrying me too. So
exactly. And and it's usually stuff that is irrelevant to your everyday work, or it's something you saw on TV, it's something someone said. We were talking about this earlier about the opening ceremony for the Olympics. Why is that doing my head?
Messing with Judith's head. Goodness knows why.
With my head. And you know why? It's because I put my marketing hat on and I go, okay, why would you have that kind of depiction? You know how it's the great Last Supper depiction.
Oh, well, it's debatable whether it's Last Supper or a Bacchus.
Yeah. I call BS on the ones that say it wasn't depicting the Last Supper. But anyway, that's just my view. But irrelevant of what it is. When I put my marketing hat on, I go, okay, it's a missed opportunity, I think, because I look at the Olympics and I go, when it's an opportunity for the country to really talk about their heritage and the history. And so when you walk away, you kind of go, oh, wow, I didn't know that. And then the other thing is, why would you upset 50% of the world? Because Christianity and Islam makes up about 50%, and a lot of them were offended. So does religion really need to be in the Olympics?
It's really riled you up. It's really riled you up.
It has totally riled me up, because I think, I looked at all the other Olympics that we've had, and I love watching the opening ceremonies. And if I think about the Tokyo one and the Australian one, how they had the man from Snowy River, there was a narrator that narrated the whole thing. And that's where another thing where I think they went wrong. They should have had somebody explain.
You're just a perfectionist, Judith. I think that's the underlying issue. It wasn't perfect for you.
But the point is, why am I letting that get in my head and having havoc when I literally cannot do anything about it? And that's what we do to ourselves. We get upset about stuff that we don't have any control over, but we can control our emotions, which I'm trying to do. We can
control our emotions. So great segue. Today, we are joined by a special pop-in guest who we're delighted to have on our first episode of Headspace Havoc. Elizabeth Foley joins us. She's a seasoned executive, a company director. She now has a portfolio of things that she's up to. She's also a very, very long-term and very special friend of mine. So I'm going to declare my interest in my conversation with Elizabeth. We've been friends for a very long time, which is we met in our early careers when we were superstars. And now are we superstars, Elizabeth? What's messing with your head?
Oh, Christina, that's a really good question. And there's a lot going on, I think, as we age and move through our careers, and becomes a bit of a head job. Can I say that?
Yeah.
Any really bad words. But as I've moved from being a CEO, I've been CEO twice, I've been on senior boards, and when you're suddenly really important and really busy, the headspace of having a portfolio career of non-executive director appointments, a bit of coaching, those sorts of things, is the downtime. You have a lot of time when you do have space for thinking. And the big area is loss of identity. It's so silly, but even when you write down, say, on any forms, a medical form, or
what's your profession? What's your career?
Career. And I sit there and I say, oh, do I say I'm semi-retired? Or and how silly that I sit there and I'm confronted about this form no one's going to look at. But my identity is so important. We spend our whole, from very early childhood, what are you going to be when you grow up?
So true.
I'm grown up now. I'm more than grown up. And what am I going to be now? I don't know how you're feeling about
it's who am I? And it happens, I listened to your story about when you've been CEO a number of times, and I know when I've been in senior positions, and I was CEO as well of an organization where everybody wanted a piece of me because I was important at the time.
Yeah.
In it, I left that job, I was dropped. I was no longer useful to them.
Yeah.
And there's a little bit of that plays out when you start to transition. It's like, well, who am I now? And that's part of it's that busyness, because it's like we're almost afraid to stop. So that's kind of one of the issues is I don't know how to be still. I suffer from that. I feel very guilty when I'm still, which is not a good thing. And then the other thing is this identity bit. It's like, well, if I'm not CEO, if I'm not chair, if I'm not director, what am I? Am I Christina Golfer? Am I Elizabeth Golfer? Am I Elizabeth Sailor? Am I Elizabeth at home? And I think a lot of people grapple with that.
Yes, but it's got some good sides too. I'm feeling one of the things that I'm really enjoying is I'm catching up with one of my cousins. We've made a commitment to catch up twice a year. And before that, we might go 3 or 4 years where we don't speak to each other. And because I was a big, important CEO, I felt we didn't have a lot in common because she'd taken the more family route. And yet, moving to this stage of our lives, it's so much more equalising. And we have so much more in common, even though she didn't go to she didn't go to university, for example. And yet now I feel like it's back from when we were small children and used to spend a lot of time together. Our values are the same, brought up in the same family culture. And now I've got this wonderful relationship with someone who wasn't in my circle for the last 40 years because she wasn't on the career track.
Yeah.
And I find it an incredible gift. Even when she laughs, she reminds me of her mother and therefore my father. So there's some really beautiful aspects. And yet I still feel, oh, my God, when am I going to write retired? Or ticking the age group of, oh, God, I'm not in that bracket. I want to be in the younger bracket.
Am I a boomer? Am I an Xer? Am I
it's so I'm consuming in terms of your space. But the other other thing that's I find is you feel like you get much less done. And Christine, you said yourself you're a very busy person, and I tend to be a very busy person, but I get the frustration and perhaps also not the dopamine hits of feeling like you're getting a lot done, because I don't have the structure of I have to go into an office, and there are apparently dopamine hits that you get from even making it into the office and those small things. And of course, I don't have a executive assistant anymore, so you do just get lots. Who do you delegate to? Well, I try and delegate to my husband, and he just throws it back, or we try and even it out. And it's going through that, and it's like being a teenager again in some ways. And of course, we've also just gone through the process of selling our place in the inner city to moving a bit further out so we can be on the river, a bit more recreational, and also more space. We actually found when we were spending more time together at home, the executive pad on Sydney Harbour was actually we're tripping over each other and wanted more space. So we sort of upsized space-wise instead of downsized. But they're the sorts of issues. But I can tell you, having done it, I thought, God, this is so stressful. And you think, oh, how did I used to just move house every 5 or 10 years in my youth?
We're getting older. That's why everything becomes harder.
Well, they also say, the old saying, if you want something done, give it to a busy person, because we did used to pack things into a day. And then when we're not running businesses anymore, well, what do we need to do that for? We've got more time, so it gets stretched out. And then you do kind of go, okay, what did I do today?
Yeah.
What did I do? What did I do today? And I wonder, Elizabeth, with because when you're going to company events or cocktail events or things like that anymore these days, do you feel a difference the way people treat you?
I think people start to ask a lot of questions, and that's because I also do a lot of work in some interesting areas. But yeah, I think I felt more anxiety going to them because not the busyness. And also I stopped drinking 2 years ago. And it used to be much easier when you first went up that you sort of had a Dutch courage glass of champagne and you could talk to anyone. And I think I have a slight more anxiety, or do I value the conversations as much myself? Like, do you want to keep networking? How long do you have to keep doing this for? When is it?
And what's it for? We kind of do the whole networking business because we want to get ahead. We want to find, let's be honest, we want to find who's going to be useful to us, who we like, who we want to do business with, and who's going to be useful to us. And that takes an enormous amount of work, putting that face on, being interesting to them, asking them the right questions, being present, and all of those sorts of things. And as you're transitioning, you kind of start to think more about the relationships you've got with your cousin, for example. It's, well, who do I have a heart connection with? Who do I like? Who do I want to hang out with? And it's no longer about what your title is. It's who are you as a human being? And do I like hanging out with you?
When I was doing executive search, the people who were getting to the end of their career, there'd be a lot of people who thought, I'm going to retire early. And when I say retire early, in their 50s, because they've had a very successful career, so they think they can. Now, the interesting thing is, well, most of them were men because they were in those positions. They didn't last more than 12 months out because they got bored. And also, it was about their value. They said that they didn't feel valued anymore. They didn't, because this minute, and it happens to both men and women, the minute they get out of corporate, nobody's calling them
Yes.
No one's calling them because they don't need them anymore. There's no more value. And then all of a sudden the phone's not ringing and they're at home and they're, how much golf can you play? Or how
Oh,
much
you can play a fair bit of golf, let me tell you.
I know, but still, and how much gardening can you do? The reality is they're not ready. Mentally, they're not ready. You have to be, I believe, mentally ready to make that switch and throw out all your paperwork, and clean out your office. And
do people ever fully retire? Like, I kind of think about it for myself and I go, and I know, Elizabeth, you and I have had these conversations. It's like because we've always contributed, we want to continue to contribute.
Yeah.
So there's this, I want to do something. I want to keep my hand in. I want to help. I want to share my wisdom. And if it's not full-time, you kind of want to do something beyond the gardening, the golf, the catching up with friends for lunch.
I do find the networking, I've sort of switched now from networking more to give than to get. And it's either I'm doing it for one of the charities that I'm part of, as well as executives and young people that I meet. So I network more around those areas. No, sometimes I get out and say, yes, I need to do some serious ones to get on boards, particularly if you're changing, your term comes to the end of one. But you do start to think, don't I have enough money and how long do I have to keep
doing this for?
Because you do get to that phase and then contribute in other ways. But I think making sure you've got something that's intellectually stimulating. So for me, being able to say I've been on the board of the Australian National Research Organisation for Women's Safety, and at networking events, particularly with women, that really resonates and people really want to know about it. And inevitably people say, we've just had a problem at work with someone who's had to go on domestic violence leave, or can we contribute, or how can we be involved? So I find that really, and look, some women have called me aside and that's all they want to talk about and share their personal stories with me. So that's given me ability at some of these events to have some really heartfelt connections. But I think that is a bit of the shift to this stage, and then making the decision is, how do you, one, get that feeling of community? But status is a big thing. Value, or whether it's our ego or not.
And it is in our own, I mean, let's face it, it is in our own heads, that whole status thing. It's how we feel, and it's intensely personal, I think.
Yeah. But I must admit, when some people knock on the door and say, oh, do you want to apply for this? I was asked to step in to look at doing a interim CEO role. And I did throw my head in because I thought, oh, okay, got a marina out the front now. That could pay for a boat.
Yes.
But when you did that and you think, I've got to go through the interview process again and all that sort of thing, you do start to say, oh, I'm just a bit over that. How long is there? And then there's, if you're talking about head jobs, then there's a whole thing of, oh, well, what if I stop that? And what if I don't have any earned income from my labour and just rely on my investments and my superannuation? But there's fears around that. I mean, for those of us who watched our superannuation balances during the 2008 global financial crash, and when those who were heavily invested in shares, watched it go down 40 and 50%. You've got those sorts of fears as well. So there's there's needing the community, there's needing the structure. I do miss having a structure which can be very healthy. there's loss of sense of achievement,
Mm.
you know, so you feel
Weeding doesn't cut it for you. I got great sense of achievement pulling out a whole bunch of weeds, instant gratification.
okay.
The other thing is, and I hear this a lot, is people fighting ageism. And because that is a real thing where, you know, going for those roles, there's still a stigma of bringing people in at a certain age that they're not going to have the energy that the younger ones might have. And so, and I get this feedback all the time from people who think, you know, that they've been a victim of ageism. People see them at, you know, I'm going to take a chance on maybe the 40-year-old instead of the late 50s or the 60-year-old who still, you know, we see it all the time. But and that might be, there might be some relevance there, but it might be totally off the mark as well, because it's all individual depending on the person. And so then, to your point, Elizabeth, you didn't want to audition for the part because you've been the star, you've been and so just like in celebrity land, you know, Ryan Reynolds is probably not going to want to audition for the next big part because he's already paid his dues, or Hugh Jackman or whatever. And so why should I have to audition? But the reality is everybody has to audition, and then you might not get it. So you might be thinking, do I really want to go through all that and then not get it?
Yes, exactly.
It's a lot of effort. It's emotionally draining.
It is. It is. And look, it even makes decisions like 3 years ago, my sister, who's 10 years my senior, had breast cancer and lost all her hair and was growing it back short. And in solidarity, I decided, well, I'll get a pixie haircut and go grey. And while I quite enjoyed it, the reaction of other people around me was really quite interesting. And I've gone back to growing it longer and semi-colouring it a year later, partly because I also looked at myself and I saw all my old aunties. Myself. So, you know, we face ageism in our own perception of ourselves sometimes.
Well, we do. And Christine and I were talking about this earlier. There's a real thing called invisible woman syndrome, and they've done research on it, and it starts over 50.
Yeah.
At 50, we're basically, I mean, we've all had it. And I started noticing it later in my 40s, you know, going into a shop and not being waited on, or being at a bar and standing there and not getting the drink. And 10 other younger ones come and they get served. And I actually learned, and you know, I let that go for a little while, but no more. It's like,
Whatever happened to the culture of respecting wisdom, respecting a few grey hairs, respecting the knowledge and information that we can share, and putting us up on a pedestal like other cultures do? You know, the auntie, the wise auntie.
Exactly. Exactly. And the other thing with that as well, I was reading this thing the other day where, and this is so true, and I don't know if you guys have done this or not, but let's say you're having a conversation with friends or family or colleagues, and you're going, oh God, I feel so old today. I'm getting wrinkles. My hair looks terrible. I feel I've gained a few pounds, blah, 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 blah. Well, at the end of the day, you're training people how to see you. You are actually conditioning them. So stop it. Unless it's your best friend and you can talk about everything behind closed doors. You know, sending even to your partner.
Yeah, to your partner.
Even to your partner, like, oh, you know, I feel so tired. Oh God, I feel like I've gained weight, or blah, blah. I really hadn't noticed that before. This one time, like my mother, you know, who I talk about her all the time. She just turned 100 this year. But I remember this time when I took her shopping with me. It was here in Australia, and I felt like I had gained weight. And I kept talking about, oh, I've gained weight, blah, blah, blah. And we're in the dressing room, and she's in the dressing room with me. And then, and so I was undressed, and she goes, oh, you know what? You keep talking about you gaining weight, and now I see what you mean. And so I threw the clothes down and I said, yeah, right, we're going. But
You're not supposed to say that. You tell them.
I was conditioning her. I was, because I was saying it, and we do this all the time. We keep saying things to people negative about ourselves in work. Oh, I can't do that. I can't see, I do this, or I'm not experienced or not. We're conditioning other people who are listening to, then they'll start believing us.
And they haven't noticed. I
haven't noticed.
had a different, and I think it happens to people that are perfectionists. I'm looking at, we're on Zoom, everybody that's listening. So I'm able to look at everybody here. So I'm looking at all of us and kind of going, we're perfectionists. I fell into the same trap the other week. We've got a beautiful garden, but it's been raining. And all I can see is the weeds because I'm the perfectionist. And new friend came over and was admiring the garden. And I kept apologizing about the weeds because, I hadn't been busy enough and diligent. Do you know what? She hadn't noticed the weeds, but I was focusing on the weeds. Hello.
Exactly. Stop focusing on the weeds because people don't even stop.
They don't see
people.
them.
Well, maybe that's the theme of this podcast. Don't focus on the weeds.
Well, and that's so true, Elizabeth. We can get so caught up in the I'm not being noticed or I'm not achieving. And it's about how do we reframe all of that? It's like, and I heard you reframing it. It's like, I've now got a beautiful relationship with my cousin. I'm now achieving by giving. Reframe how we see ourselves and how we define. In particular, I think achievement's been a big thing for anyone that's come from corporate. And don't be so hard on ourselves in terms of what did we do today? What if we valued stillness? She says to herself, not really believing what she's saying. But what if we did? What if we valued stillness?
That's exactly right. Yep. And the thing is, Elizabeth, if someone's saying, are you interested in this job, whether it's a interim CEO or board position or whatever, the first rule of thumb is, does it sound exciting? Am I interested in it? And then if it is, well, what the hell? I'll just go for it. If I got to go through a process, might be kind of interesting, might be kind of fun. I'll meet some people, we'll go through it, and they might not want me for this, but I'm on the radar now, and they might want me for, or you might get consulting business for it, because that's happened a lot during my years of consultancy when people have gone for the top job. They didn't get that role, but they were on the radar of the company and they said, hey, do you think they would do this consultancy assignment? And for people like us, who have had top careers and now we're, working on our own.
Differently. We're working differently.
We love consultancy assignments. We love that because we don't want the long-term, corporate gig at the CEO level anymore because we've been there, done that. So we'll do the consultancy. We'll go in, we'll do that. Or they might even want you to go in and do a presentation for their team on something, on giving, on what you're doing as inspiration. So things can come out of the craziest places, but if you don't put yourself out there, you won't know.
Well, that's really true. And I was talking to a CEO of a financial services organisation in Melbourne earlier in the year, and I mentioned that I, in my earlier career, had a coaching company, and he asked me to coach some of his executives. And I've met some lovely people in that way. And it's a way of keeping connection with that and getting to know that company a bit better, which might result in, who knows, on the board of a subsidiary or some advisory group down the track. But it is about being open to those things and enjoying those. And for that, I find I now also have the time to, when I am coaching or mentoring, and I mentor a lot of people, is I have the time now to reflect and then maybe look at some articles and what that support that, some academic framework or just some examples. And then I find what's really good is then I can see how that can translate to other bits of work that I'm on. So one area, for example, was the use of the term stretch targets. And everybody on a particular board had a different definition of that. And so I looked up some Harvard Business Review articles on that, and I was able to share it not only with a couple of coaching clients, but with a different board to say these are the sorts of things that I'm learning, and also send it to a few networking colleagues who I thought it would be helpful for. So that's the sort of, I guess, intellectual stimulation that you can also get from coaching or for some board positions. And why having a portfolio career can be really great, because what you do have as an issue in one board, you start to suddenly say, oh, hang on, should I be looking at that in this space or with this executive? So I find that really rewarding personally, and helps me build relationships and deeper relationships with the other people that I'm working in. And also suddenly you look like a know-it-all and get so my ego gets fanned as well.
Yeah. I
So
think it's
let me
really-
ask you a question, Elizabeth. When you are thinking about these things, and when you have issues that that are kind of stressful to you and that type of thing, do you still have coaches and mentors that you go to help you with decisions?
I do. Yeah, that's a really good point. I have a series of them. I keep a personal counsellor who I pay to see regularly, and it mightn't be all the time, but particularly if I'm struggling with various issues at various times. I also keep up with a lot of other more experienced executive directors, and I try and have coffees with them and learn from them, plus talking with other board people. But yes, I believe that support in that way is really important. But I also find, deep professional, colleagues that have become good friends are also excellent in that. And my husband has a professional background as well, so he's a trained family therapist, so that's also very helpful. But sometimes that's a bit close for call. But yeah, I do find that's a really important ingredient in where I am in my life. And you don't have to use it all the time, but it is a case of and sometimes I have two successful older sisters as well, and bouncing things off them I've also found very helpful. Although they're these ridiculous women who have been having senior jobs well past 65. So I think in some areas I'm leading the charge of slowing down earlier.
And it's so important to have those people. It's like having your own board of directors that you can access. And and I always recommend too that people should have people in their group who are also younger than they are, a lot younger, so they can get that kind of take on what's happening. Like a different, if you're in your 60s, you should have somebody on your own personal board in their 40s. And sort of be able to see what the younger ones are thinking, basically.
Yeah, because otherwise all you get is confirmation bias from people that are experiencing the same thing as you, and you never get a chance to reframe it.
Exactly.
That's so true. That is so true. And actually, in some of the younger people I coach, I get as much back from talking to them and examining them and what they're going through. And it is a very different world, I think, for people who are seriously older and haven't been an executive or in senior roles or gaining work since the pandemic. I think that's been very a really significant change, just like global financial crisis was. There's different ways of doing business, different ways of relating people, and the world has changed so much.
And how you do business has changed.
Absolutely. Well, now listen, on that note, have we freed up a little bit of our headspace havoc? Is there a little bit of room left there, because we've got some of the things off our chest today?
Oh, certainly have. I have. I hope you do as well.
I'm really thankful to you, Elizabeth, for being so honest about it, because I think there are many people that are dealing with the headspace havoc that you've shared with us, but don't have the courage to talk about it. So I thank you for that.
Absolutely.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much. And I might just say to the audience, don't forget to subscribe and follow us on Spotify or Apple or YouTube. We really would appreciate that. And next week we'll have another Headspace Havoc that we'll hash out and see what happens.
And if you've got something that's troubling you and you'd like to contribute, please get in touch with us.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Thanks. For more information about Every Step and our guests, head to everysteppodcast.com. To be notified of new podcasts, please subscribe via your favourite listening platform. And of course, follow us on social media and direct message us to share your ideas about guests or topics.